Chag Sameach and Good Yontef. Of all the upcoming events, I want to flag one for you. Tuesday evening, there will be a public debate about the location of the Canadian Embassy in Israel. And it is a timely conversation. It will be an important conversation between Paul Michaels from CIJA and John Allen, a former Canadian ambassador to Israel, moderated by our congregant, Rob Steiner from the Monk School. So I encourage you to come. Thank you to our temple singers for hitting every emotional note in this service, from the joyful sounds of Hallel to soon the mournful tones of Yizkor. Your voices encourage us to lift up our own voices in prayer. Immediately following the service, everyone, of course, is welcome for our congregational Kiddush lunch in the Philip Smith Hall on the lower level of the other building. The best way is out through the doors and to the right under the covered walkway. Thank you to our ushers for showing the way. There's a ramp to exit here if you should need. And thank you to Marcia and Kenny Cohen for generously sponsoring this Kiddush lunch in memory of Bernard, Carol, and Samuel Braun. May their memories be for a blessing. And Mazel Tov, of course, to our Kirchei Kodesh, this chain of tradition, which is right at the center of what we celebrate on Shavuot, is exemplified by the covenantal relationship and the loyalty that you and your families have with Holy Blossom Temple. We are strengthened by you. Ecclesiastes teaches there is a time to throw stones and a time to gather stones together. For weeks now, Israel has been along the Gaza border, desperate to find a way to quiet that border, to defend that border. It is also written in Ecclesiastes that there is a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. For years now, decades in fact, Israel has tried to find a way to two states, side by side, living in peace. Even a cool peace would suffice, like the story of Avram and his nephew Lot. Genesis 13 gives the account of when there comes a time to refrain from embracing and to separate from one another. Avram was very rich, it is written, with livestock, silver, and gold. Now Lot, who had been with Avram, also had flocks and herds and tents, so that the land could not support them both together. They could not remain together. One day a quarrel broke out between Avram's cattle herders and Lot's cattle herders. So Avram said to Lot, "There should be no quarreling between you and me, for we are close kin. The whole land lies before you. So please part from me now. If you go north, I will go south. If you go south, I will go north." So Lot surveyed the whole Jordan plain. All of it was well watered like a divine garden. So Lot chose the whole Jordan plain for himself and moved away toward the east. They parted then from one another. Ecclesiastes instructs that one of the secrets of life is knowing when to draw close to one another, when to enmesh our lives with one another, and when to separate. A time for every experience under heaven, if only we knew how. The theme of Shavuot, of course, is drawing nearer to one another. Nearer to God through giving and receiving of Torah, nearer to one another through relationships of loving loyalty, like Ruth and Naomi. 2 weeks ago, I had the pleasure of studying with 3 scholars from the Hartman Institute in Jerusalem. Among them is Rabbi Dami Siegel. He compares the scene of Naomi and Ruth, the one we just heard, with the one of Avram and Lot. These two scenes are linguistically linked by one word with the root pei resh dalet, meaning to depart from one another. So there's this linguistic, invisible bridge between the two tales. One about separating, the other of conjoining. Rabbi Siegel imagines that when Naomi and Ruth were journeying their way back to Eretz Israel, they came upon a certain place. And Naomi turned to her daughters-in-law and said, "Okay, my dears, this is where we part. For at this very place, generations ago, my ancestor Avraham Avinu separated from his nephew Lot. And that was a good decision then. So now you go your way back to your land of Moab, and I will return to my home in Israel." It was a sensible plan. Orpah understood it. She bid farewell to Naomi and she went her way. But Ruth did the most unusual thing, the uncommon thing. She refused to depart from Naomi. She rejected that historical precedent, and instead she clung to her mother-in-law, and she made the surprising pledge of lasting loyalty. Ki el asher telchi elech, for wherever you go, I will go. Uvecha asher talini alin, wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Amech ami, ve'elohaich Elohai. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Wherever you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. The Eternal will do thus for me, and more as well, if anything but death should yafrid beini uvenech, should separate me from you. Rabbi Siegel lives very near that historic place that was in Avram's generation a place of separating, and in Naomi's generation a place of conjoining. And he told me that he's put a sign up under a particular ancient tree in his neighborhood. The sign says something like, "This is the very place where Avram and Lot departed from one another, and they carved out separate fates. And this is the very place where Ruth and Naomi broke from that legacy of separation, that cool peace of distancing. Instead of repeating history, Ruth and Naomi clung to one another, created a shared destiny, which will one day make way for the eventual dawning of the Messianic age." Today, Shavuot is a celebration of choosing loving loyalty whenever possible. And if it is not possible, then we pray that we can separate from one another to find paths of peace, whether it's between peoples or between individuals. But the ultimate relationship is a covenantal relationship that endures. At Sinai, God and the Jewish people entered into an enduring covenant, a brit of mutual responsibility, one for the other. A brit of deep devotion, one for the other. A brit of high expectations for one another. There is a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. Sometimes departure is inevitable, even from people and things that we love. In fact, very few relationships endure forever. Even the most magnificent covenant between God and the Jewish people waxes and wanes through the centuries, sometimes stronger than steel, sometimes delicate as thin glass. But for 3,500 years, a remnant always remains steadfast and true, enduring despite the odds. There is a prayer for departures. There is a prayer when a student of Torah completes a holy book and prepares herself to return it to the shelf. You may know the feeling. Maybe even a book of fiction that you enjoy so much you find yourself reading slowly. Those last pages, you want to savor every word. You don't look forward to closing the cover and returning it to the shelf. How much more so for a holy book that comes to conclusion. There is a prayer we say, Hadran alach v'hadran alan, da'atan alach v'da'atech alan, lo nitnashi minech v'lo titnashi minan, lo ba'alma hadin v'lo ba'alma da'ati. And we actually insert the name of the book into this prayer, the tractate of the Talmud, for example, and we address the book lovingly, with gratitude and affection. Since we just concluded the book of the Ten Commandments, we can address it here, expressing our desire to return to it again in the future. This Aramaic prayer means we will return to you, Ten Commandments, and you will return to us. We will be mindful of you, Ten Commandments, and you will be mindful of us. We will not forget you, O Ten Commandments, and you will not forget us, not in this world, and not in the world to come. It is customary to repeat this Hadran prayer 3 times before returning a book to the shelf. How much more so for a human being, a loved one, a human being who was once a part of our lives and then was laid to rest. This Yizkor service is a kind of Hadran, an expression of our desire to return to those we love. We can say this prayer 3 times over, longingly, lovingly, and insert the name of our beloved dead into the prayer. We will return to you, O beloved, and you will return to us. We will be mindful of you, beloved one, and you will be mindful of us. We will not forget you, O beloved, and you will not forget us, not in this world, and not in the world to come. There is a Hasidic tale, an oral tradition with variations. It is known as the Ocean of Tears, and it tells a version of this story but makes it personal, between a father and a son. It is said that Rabbi Yitzchak Avorki and his son Mendele were unusually devoted to one another, enmeshed, conjoined. They chose a common path. Rabbi Yitzchak shared his boundless wisdom with his son and taught him the deepest rules of chesed and loving kindness. But then it happened, as eventually it does even with the great and the pious. It happened that Rabbi Yitzchak died, and his soul departed this earth. Mendele's grief was without end. In his grief, Mendele held out hope that his father might send him a sign from Olam Haba, from the world to come. But 4 weeks passed, no message, no sign, not even in a dream. Mendele was named for his father's closest friend, Reb Menachem Mendel of Kotsk, the Kotzker Rebbe. So young Mendele, bereft as he was, traveled to Kotsk to ask the rabbi, "Have you heard from my father?" Now the Kotzker Rebbe rarely received visitors, but when he heard that it was his friend's son, he received him at once. Young Mendele cried, "Rebbe, my father never went on a journey without writing a letter to me every single day. You know how close we were, how conjoined we were one to the other. I was certain that somehow he would find a way to reach out to me, even from Gan Eden. But 4 weeks have passed and I haven't heard from him." The Kotzker said, "Mendele, I share your grief. Your father and I were like brothers, you know, and I expected him to send a sign to me from Olam Haba. When no word came, not even in a dream, I decided to go to him. Let me tell you about my journey." The Rebbe explained, "The great sages are each given palaces in the world to come, so that they can continue teaching Torah there. And so I first ascended on high to the palace of Maimonides, the 12th century sage from Spain and Egypt, and a multitude of angels and the souls of many of his disciples and the righteous were gathered there to learn from him. I hung on every word from the Rambam, how he taught the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And after the lesson, I took up my courage to approach him, and I told him about my mission to find your father. And he said, yes, Rabbi Yitzchak was here, a delightful teacher, but he's gone now. So I thanked the Rambam, and I went on to ascend to the palace of no other than Rashi, of the 11th century Ashkenaz. And again, the palace was filled with angels and the souls of the righteous, all learning from him. And I said, after the lesson, I took up my courage and I said, Rashi, please tell me, I'm in search of my friend, my brother, Rabbi Yitzchak. Have you seen him? I imagine he would have come to learn from you too. And Rashi said, yes, Rabbi Yitzchak was here. He illuminated many mysteries of Torah for me too. But then he left. And so from there, I went to the palace of Rabbi Akiva of the 2nd century of Caesarea. And the same message, yes, he was here, but Rabbi Yitzchak has gone. And then I went to the palace of Ezra the scribe, who lived to see Jerusalem's temple rebuilt and Torah given to the people there in the 5th century BCE. And he too said, yes, Rabbi Yitzchak was here, and he joined in our learnings, but he's gone now. And then I ascended to the palace, none other, the palace of King Solomon himself, the one who was blessed to build that temple in Jerusalem. And he too said, yes, Rabbi Yitzchak was here, but now he's gone. Until finally, Menachem Mendel, the Kotzker Rebbe, said, I ascended to the palace of none other than Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher Moses, and in the presence of myriads of angels and the souls of so many of the righteous, I learned Torah from the very lips of Moses. I wanted to remain there forever. But I remembered your father, and I remembered my mission. And so when Moses completed the lesson, I went to him weeping in tears. I begged him, I thanked him for his spiritual courage at Mount Sinai in bringing the eternal blessings of Torah down to the foot of the mountain so that we might receive them. And wouldn't you know it, Moses said, Menachem Mendel, your seat is waiting for you. Come join us. And I said, not yet. Not yet. My work is not done on earth. I need to return with word about my friend, Rabbi Yitzchak. Can you tell me, please, was he here? And Moses said, of course. I had a seat reserved for Rabbi Yitzchak as well. But he's gone now, I'm sorry to say. The Kotzker Rebbe burst into tears. Please, Moshe, tell me, where can I find him? I am desperate to speak with him. And then Moses gave me instruction that I needed to go to the end of the very darkest forest. And so I traveled there and I heard waves lapping until there was an opening in the forest and I could see the ocean. The ocean of tears. The waves were crying. And there was my friend, Rabbi Yitzchak, leaning on a cane, with his eyes locked on that ocean of tears. I cried out to him, but he didn't even look up. So focused was he on the ocean of tears. I said, Yitzchak, it is I. He said, do you know what this ocean is? Never once taking his eyes from the ocean of tears. He explained to me, this is the ocean of tears shed by the people of Israel. And the waves themselves are crying out to God. And that is why you hear the sobbing. I would have preferred to spend all of eternity studying in the heavenly Jerusalem, but I vowed to never leave this place until God dries the tears of my people. And so I've been praying day and night. Will you please conjoin your prayers with mine? Of course, I said. And so the two friends prayed together. The Kotzker Rebbe said To young Mendele, I've never cried so hard. I've never prayed so hard. And when our tears fell into the ocean of tears, the most miraculous thing happened. Our tears dried up the tears of the people of Israel. This is what we call a good cry. This is what we call good grief. When young Mendele heard these words, he added his tears to those of his father and of the Kotzker Rebbe. And that night, you would have guessed it, he dreamed a dream that he and his father were standing side by side, conjoined as one, in the heavenly Jerusalem studying Torah, surrounded by the joyful voices of myriads of angels and the joyful insights of sages wise, and a wonderful light shone from his father's face. Death is a most dramatic departure. But on Yizkor days like this, we are reminded that forever is not as forever as we feared. Yizkor is a time for reunion, for conjoining with the souls of our beloved dead, if only for a moment. Here in the setting of this sanctuary, here in the setting of this holy day, we have a chance to draw near to them once again. This is our sacred task now, of loving and losing, of living and learning.